All right, episode 6 of the BG show. Bryce Gelman here. And who would have thought we'd make it to episode 6, considering the negativity going on in New York sports right now? Yesterday was no different than the day before and the day before that. Because the New York Yankees yesterday made an absolute fool of themselves. First, it was Steinbrenner, and then it was Brian Cashman. And joining me today to discuss all this negativity, all this BS, as Brian Cashman would put it, is John Jastremski of The Ringer's New York podcast, exclusively on Spotify and of SNY. JJ is one of the top guys to talk to about this. He is a good friend of mine. And let's bring him in. JJ, what's going on, man?
Bryce, there's a lot cooking. What else is new? We're hanging in there, man. What's up, man?
Nothing much. Just dealing with the misery of being a Yankees, Giants, and Knicks fan. I can't say that yet, but I'm assuming at some point I will be able to say that third team. But yeah, it's not a good reality to live in. At least you have your Dolphins there, which can't beat a team over 500.
Yeah, I got to deal with that Kansas City loss for the next 2 weeks. But I'll tell you this, Bryce, I'd much rather have the situation of a 6-3 football team, a team that's doing everything in their power to win, and they get it and they understand what the narrative is. Like Mike, I can't believe I'm using this comparison. I never thought I'd feel this much better about the Dolphins than I do the Yankees, considering, they haven't won a playoff game in 20 years. But you just hit on it, right? Mike McDaniel said after they lost that Kansas City game, hey, the narrative is what it is until we change it, until we do something about it.
Yep.
I hear that, and I'm like, okay, my coach understands. My coach gets it. You compare that to what you heard from Hal Steinbrenner and what you heard from Brian Cashman yesterday, and it's like, dude, we're living in an alternate reality. You know what I'm saying? Especially from the GM's perspective. At least the owner said the season was unacceptable. He was just totally clueless on how to fix it and how to do something about it. He did admit it was a terrible, rotten season. Cashman, on the other hand, you would think the Yankees have the best operation in baseball listening to Cashman yesterday.
It was almost sociopathic. The tone, the looking. I mean, there's always been a slight undertone of him completely looking down on anyone else that isn't himself. He thinks he's God. He thinks that every move he makes is going to be great, and if it works out, whatever. So deal with it. And he looks down on fans, and he thinks that whatever the fans think, well, I'm smarter. I should know more. And yesterday was more of the same. And I'd say one of the craziest things I've ever witnessed as a sports fan in terms of what we heard and how we heard it. Him coming out cursing left and right. This is BS. We're effing good. Like, where does this guy get off? Like, where can he come out and say all that stuff when we saw what we saw last year? We've seen what we've seen over the last 14 seasons with no World Series, and he could come out and insult the fans and insult the media like that, JJ.
You know what I think it boils down to? And obviously now, Bryce, we've had about 12 to 14 hours to digest the comments and kind of process everything. And, I was ranting and raving about it yesterday on TV. I'm going to be doing that on Thursday when I do my podcast. And I think it comes from a place and a position more than anything where Brian Cashman's like, hey, guess what? I'm untouchable. Screw you guys.
Exactly.
That's really what I think it boils down to. There's this criticism that's been mounting. There's this criticism that's been building. And I'm sure Cashman is aware of it. Normally, Bryce, when he does these sit-downs with the media, he is like the master of giving you the longest answer without saying anything. You know what I mean? He'll give you a 3 to 4 minute diatribe.
Yeah.
And not specifically get into whatever you or I or whatever the media member may be asking him. But yesterday, he was very combative, and it was like, hey, screw you. Yeah, I made bad moves. We like what we're doing. We're proud of what we're doing. I don't know how in the world you're proud of that. 82-80. And you nailed it. Look, I was always one of these folks that was a Cashman defender. If you go back to 17 and 18, because I said, look,
well, for good reason.
You know what I mean? They went through the end of Jeter and Rivera and Posada, and it was this this balancing act of, hey, we have aging Yankee teams. We know we're still the Yankees. We know there's still the Yankee brand, but we got to get younger. We got to get better. And when 16 and 17 rolled around, I was like, holy shit, Brian Cashman just knocked it out of the park. They traded away Miller. They traded away Chapman. They traded away Beltran. The following year, they're in the playoffs. They have Aaron Judge. And I'm like, okay, they now are set up and they have laid the groundwork for the next Yankee run. And in reality, player development stunk from that point forward. The moves they have made, they've made the wrong ones with the exception of Garrett Cole. For the most part, they've made the wrong moves as far as free agency is concerned. And they've made bad trades. They've built a flawed roster, and he's the architect. So there's nobody to blame. People want to get on Hal, and they can in some degree. This is Cashman's baby. When I look at why the Yankees are in a position that they're in, to me, it's a lot more about Brian Cashman, despite my problems and issues with Hal Steinbrenner, and despite the fact that Hal doesn't get it. Bryce, to me, it's far more about Cashman than Hal.
Hal is the one enabling it, though. He's the one going out and saying, Brian, you've got the biggest leash possible. You're never going to get fired. Your family. You know, if George was around, and you hear a lot about this on social media when anything bad happens in Yankee world. If George was around, Brian Cashman is gone 3, 4, 5, even 5 years ago.
I think after a decade ago. I'd say
maybe even that.
Ago.
Maybe even 100%. That. But I think that there was like a limbo period where the Yankees, as you said, there were aging stars, and he had to replenish the roster. He had to draft some young talent. So I think George would have given him some leash there. But when you lose in 2018, you get blown out by the Red Sox right after you trade for the former NL MVP. You have this. What did they say? The Death, fully operational Death Star, and you have this incredible lineup of the 2 top home run hitting guys in all of baseball, and you fall flat on your face. And then in 2019, you come within a game of potentially advancing to the World Series. You lose again. 2020 COVID season. 2021, 2022, you don't have a good roster. You get to that point, you get to the playoffs. 2022, they get swept by the Astros, and they come out and they say, we made the ALCS. Look at that. Would you look at that? And the fact of the matter is, that wasn't good enough.
See, that's the issue.
That wasn't good enough. And even this year, even what Cashman said yesterday was like, well, the same people who were saying that the roster was good this year, the roster, we had a World Series. No one said that. I don't know anyone saying that this Yankees team was good enough to make the World Series before the season. They didn't have a left fielder. They expected to just, okay, whatever, we'll start the season without our left fielder. We'll trade for one. They never traded for one. And when the price got too big for Bellinger because they refused to sign him in the offseason, they couldn't trade for him because the Cubs wouldn't allow it. So they shot themselves in the foot last year. I have no idea what he's talking about, criticizing the fans for flipping on him, when in reality, I think Yankee fans have been against Cashman since the end of last season.
They've turned on him. I don't think there's any question about it. You mentioned Bellinger. I'm not going to get on them for the trade deadline because the Cubs started putting it together and they said, all right, they're going to.
Oh, yeah, exactly. They couldn't make that move.
Here was the issue. They could have had him, to your point, in the offseason for $9 or $10 million a year, and they didn't go down that road, and they had a black hole in left field. And, you mentioned the Stanton move. The Stanton move, despite the fact he had some big years for the Yankees and he had some big postseason moments for the Yankees, in hindsight, it was a terrible trade. It was a terrible trade because they lost their element of balance when they made that trade. They had an opportunity the year after, 2018, to go and sign Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper was the lefty bat they were lacking. That would have been the perfect yin and yang, in my opinion, Aaron Judge. It would have gave them the sort of edge that I think they desperately needed within that clubhouse because Harper's a badass and, at times he's going to rub some people the wrong way, but he gives a crap. And to me, there's something to that. And look, you can't deny the success he's had with the Philadelphia Phillies. In many ways, Bryce, they've made a lot of bad moves. We could talk about Donaldson, Gallo, the list goes on and on. But that fork in the road moment when they missed out on Ohtani, they pivoted to Giancarlo Stanton. Yeah, they got Stanton for nothing, but can't play the field. He's hurt all the time. He's another lumbering right-handed bat. Makes you easier to pitch to. You know what I mean? You have the same sort of hitter in your lineup up and down, up and down, up and down the lineup. And yeah, I think one of their biggest whiffs was choosing Stanton over Bryce Harper. There's no denying that.
And I think them going to Game 7 of the ALCS in 2017 is also the reason why they're in the spot. Because at that point, they thought, okay, this is a rebuilding year. We've got these young superstars, these young budding superstars in Judge and Sanchez and Severino. All right, look at that. We just made Game 7 of the world of the ALCS against a cheating Astros team, which they didn't know at the time. But they expected, okay, we're 1 or 2 moves away from potentially making the World Series and potentially winning it the next year. So they saw at that moment an opportunity to trade for Giancarlo. They basically gave up nothing, Starlin Castro and a few younger players, to take on the majority of that contract and to bring in the former MVP. But in reality, they should have understood that with Harper coming into free agency the next year, that was the right move to make. And I think every Yankees fan saw that. Every rational Yankees fan was like, why you? I mean, it's great that you got Stanton, but like Harper. And then when they used the reason, to justify, he justified it by saying, well, we have Stanton, we have Ellsbury. I forgot the exact quote, but it's one of the most absurd quotes Cashman's ever come out with. When you justify not being able to sign potentially, I mean, you said it. I mean, if they sign Harper, the next 5 years, the last 5 years from now look completely different. But when you justify it by saying that you traded for Giancarlo Stanton and that's enough, and then that's been your mindset, it's infuriating, JJ. And I'm like struggling to find words right now because it's like, I can't believe that this is the New York Yankees. I can't believe that. I mean, at least you witnessed the golden era, the golden age of the Yankees, the 4 championships in 5 years. I didn't witness that. I had 2009. I'm grateful. At least I'm not 5-6 years younger where I haven't witnessed anything. I've witnessed the World Series, but it's like, how can this continue to happen? How can this incompetency and this, this indignant nature from the Yankees continue to happen?
Well, I think there's a state of complacency. I think that, unfortunately, is the problem. And I talk about the Yankees being on planet delusional. I think if you were to talk to people within the organization, Bryce, this is where they would beg to differ with us. They would look at the last 5 or 6 years and say, hey, we've been in the ALCS in 17 and 19 and in 2022. We've been one of the better teams in baseball. Like, their standard, the way I see it, is much lower than our standard. And I think for Hal Steinbrenner, it's, hey, we're in the playoffs. People are watching our games. People are going to our games. Here's what I want to see.
Chicken buckets.
Buying their Heinekens. Getting their buckets of chicken. Let's see what the attendance looks like this year. Here's, to me, the overarching theme. We're going to be pissed off until something drastic happens where maybe they suck us back in. What do I mean by that? They go and get Juan Soto, dude. And that, to me, is the guy they should go and get. They should put all their chips and all their eggs in the basket. He's 25. He's a prime player. He fits the Yankees perfectly. He's exactly that sort of complement to Aaron Judge that Bryce Harper could have been. Like, Juan Soto is exactly what this team is lacking, exactly what this team is looking for. I think the only way they are going to have serious excitement and interest and a charged up fan base is a move like that. Like, you mentioned Cody Bellinger. He's a nice player, but is he the guy who last year was an all-star? Or is he the guy in 2020 to 2022 that's getting non-tendered by the Los Angeles Dodgers and is basically playing a little bit better than Joey Gallo? Like, that to me is a major question with Bellinger. I like Bellinger as a player. I do. I like him with the Dodgers. I love his defense. I think he's got a lot of swag to him. But, man, can you see them going and giving $170 million to Cody Bellinger and he's hitting 210 with 30 home runs? Like, I know if they get Soto's going to walk. He's going to hit bombs. He's going to do his little shuffle and his little shimmy behind the plate when he's, like, dancing, shaking off pitches. He's the perfect guy to go and get. But the Yankees need that sort of move in order to silence what's going on between you, me, and Yankee fans throughout, because I think the trust and the confidence and the faith in this hierarchy is at an all-time low, period.
And I think this is the only positive outcome from all of this criticism, is the fact that they're going to feel compelled enough to go out and get Soto, who is far and away the top guy on the trade market right now. We know the Padres cannot afford to pay him. And we know that it's going to cost a lot to acquire him, or maybe not, because, he is in a contract year, and the Yankees wouldn't make that move unless they knew for sure that they would be able to re-sign him, which if they made that move and he decides to go somewhere else after they can't come to an agreement on a contract extension, talk about criticism from fans. But yeah, that is the only way that I think the diehard fan will show up to Yankees games. It's in New York. The amount of girls that go to Yankee Stadium, they have no idea what's going on, but they go because it's an activity to do. That's half your stadium right there. That's half of the attendance from half of the summer months.
And that's a really good point. That's becoming more and more of a thing. You go and you take the Instagram picture. You go and you go to Billy's and you're there. I get that. But when the summer kind of starts getting like hot and heavy, where people are going to the beach and people are getting out of town, and all of a sudden, like I noticed it this year for me, and maybe it's different, Bryce, because it was a wedding year for me, but like after August, I had no desire. And this is a guy who goes to 25, 30 Yankee games a year. I think I went to my last game was August against Boston. They got smoked. And I'm like, I'm not going to a game in September. I have no desire, I have no interest. And guess what? I didn't go to a game in September. You nailed it. No interest.
But they still had solid attendance numbers. And then there was that one game I forgot, it was the last week of the season, where they said 45,000. There was literally 45 people in the stands. So
that was one of those makeup games. Yeah, that was like a makeup game they had. But how much of that was tickets that they already sold, right? Like where had excitement and you had anticipation going into the year. Now you're coming off a year where you didn't make the playoffs. So you're going to have that going in? I don't know about that, dude. Not so sure.
I think the delusion from the franchise has never been higher. And I think that at the same time, they're going to look at attendance numbers for the first few weeks of this upcoming season, and they're going to be solid because it's just the Yankees. Like, people are still going to show up. That Yankee fans are still going to, they're going to obviously, react the way we're reacting to Brian Cashman saying what he said and what Hal Steinbrenner said, but they're still going to hype themselves up this offseason. They're going to get excited because what else do they have to be excited about? I mean, unless the Knicks do something crazy, the Giants, the Jets are a joke. They're going to look forward to the baseball season. The hot stove is going to heat up. The Yankees are going to be in contention for some big names. They might get Yamamoto. They're going to show up. And it's the oldest thing. Listen, I have a problem with it because every year I see people show up to these games, no matter what the diehard Yankee fan feels about this team, they still show up, and it doesn't make sense to me. Because if you put this team in the Midwest, you put them on the West Coast in Seattle, no one is showing up for these games. It's New York, it's Yankee Stadium. People are going to go to these games no matter what. And the Yankees won't change anything unless people stop showing up, unless they stop making money from people showing up to games, people spending money on chicken buckets, people spending money on Heinekens, people spending money on jerseys. That's when they'll look and be like, okay, well, it's finally gotten back to us. And they have yet to do that.
I think you can see that this year if they stink, though. This is the sort of year where I think you can see it. Because they're not going to have the same gate going into the year. Yeah, you want to tell me opening day they'll sell out? Of course they'll sell out. April and May, it's cold. It's not nice. That's when people are like, all right, I'm waiting until it warms up to go to baseball games. If the Yankees are the same product they are in 2023 going into 2024, you mark my words, Bryce, they will not have the same attendance numbers. They won't.
I hope so. Because one thing that struck me, one thing that stood out to me, which has been a years-long trend with Brian Cashman, is the excuses, JJ, is the fact that one of his first things he says in his 2 to 3 minute long monologue rant is there were injuries. Aaron Judge got hurt, was out 2 months because he ran into a wall in Los Angeles. DJ LeMahieu, who he said is a perennial MVP candidate, got hurt. He was still dealing with that injury. Montas was hurt. Cortez was hurt. It's just like you look at other organizations, they're able to keep it afloat when their star players are out. The Astros still made the postseason. They still advanced to the ALCS, and 2 of their best players were out for the majority of the season, for a good portion of the season, in Altuve and Yordan. So if other teams could figure out a way to stay afloat, what is the Yankees' excuse, and why do they keep making these excuses?
Well, you got to build a better roster. In 2019, they were able to overcome that. Judge missed a lot of time. Stanton missed basically the entire year. And you had guys like Mike Tauchman and go through that whole 2019 team. It felt like it was like a revolving door of players. Cameron Maben, and they really stepped up. And they had a nice season. I remember they had a really, really nice season where it was a next man up approach. This team did not kind of follow suit on that. And let's be real, they were a terrible offensive team. And their starting pitching outside of Garrett Cole was not particularly good. I mean, what did the Yankees have going for them last year? They had a good bullpen. That was it.
They had the best bullpen in baseball by like 0.4 ERA.
That was it.
Can you imagine, though? Like, could you imagine if they actually had a competent enough organization to build a solid foundation, to build a solid team, and they made the postseason last year? They could have won it all with how good their bullpen was, how shut down those guys were. And instead, we're sitting here talking about the excuses that they're making because they did fall flat on their faces like they have the last 6, 7, well, I'd say every year since 2017, 2019, they lost. They should have won. They went down 3-1. That team didn't have anything. That 2017 team is the last time you could say that.
Yeah, and the problem is they're not moving forward towards the goal. They're moving backwards towards the goal. Have to look at Judge and Cole's prime and say, is it going to be totally wasted in a Yankee uniform? Right now, it's looking that way.
So how do you see this offseason shaking out? Do you think that they pull the trigger and acquire Soto? Or do you think they go after Yamamoto?
They're going to make a move. I don't know if it's going to be Soto. I know they're feeling the heat. They're going to make a move that has to appease the fan base in some way. I don't know if Bellinger's going to leave the Cubs because right now the Cubs was a home to him. He played really well there. They just gave Craig Counsell $8 million a year to go and be the manager. So here's the problem, though. Bryce, if they don't end up with Soto, they're not signing Ohtani. First of all, Ohtani didn't want to come here in 20. I'm not even in on the idea of the Yankees getting Ohtani. I'll tell you why. Because he didn't want to come here in 17, and that was when I really wanted him. He was this two-way phenom freak, the whole deal. Can't play the field, right? So is he playing the field? No. Is he pitching ever again? Who knows? Maybe next year he can pitch. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. Like, it's not close. I'd much rather have Soto than Ohtani. And you got to give Ohtani $50 million a year, and he's going to clog up the DH spot. It'd be better than Stanton doing it, but I wanted Ohtani in his prime. I don't want Ohtani now where he's like 30 years old. That's just me. I would rather the Yankees go in a different direction. But they will do something to get people like you and I somewhat off of their back. Do I think they will do enough? No, I do not. That's just my gut feel. I think they'll make a couple of moves. They'll do a little bit here, a little bit there. They'll get at least one name that they could put under the Christmas tree so that everybody opening holiday gifts has somebody that like, oh, we got this guy. You know what I mean? Like the Yankees used to be the kings of that. They would always make sure they had something under the tree for you in their peak years. Like it was Mike Messina. It was Jason Giambi. It was Johnny Damon. They love that. I still think that's kind of ingrained in their minds, and especially off a year where they didn't make the playoffs, they're definitely going to give you something. I just don't know if it will be the guy.
It feels like any move that they'd make, the entire intention behind it would be to placate the fans.
In some ways, but you know what? If you're getting a guy like Soto, that's not placating the fans. That's placating the fans who are trying to win.
It's not, but you acquire him, you still have a problem with starting pitching. With the starting pitching. You know, you don't know what Rodon's going to be. He's still under contract for the next, 7 years? So you've 6 years. You have no idea what he's going to be. Severino's gone. Montes is gone. Is Michael King really a viable option as a starting pitcher? You don't. They're looking at him as a starter, and they should be. He pitched really well. He was solid. He was solid, but
he's not a given. You know,
can he hold up
over 162 games? No idea.
If you go out and trade for Soto, you might have to give up a guy like that because the Padres are in a win now mode. They're going to want guys who could help them win now. Michael King might be an expendable piece.
Yeah, and I would trade him. I would trade him. I wouldn't take 12.
Yeah, exactly. So then you trade him away, and then you have only two starting pitchers, Nestor and Garrett.
Well, I know.
And
Listen, I don't like.
okay, but yeah, but Rodon's still a question mark.
He's going to be in the rotation to start the year next year.
Yes, but he's still
a
question mark.
He will be a part of the 5.
You got to hope that he lives up to the contract, because that was the Yankees' move last year, and I felt like it was an incremental move. And this year it could be Soto, and that wouldn't be as incremental. You know, that would be a season, a franchise-changing move. But that was their move last year. And it literally, I mean, we saw what happened, that he was getting annoyed with fans in Anaheim. Like, the guy doesn't seem like he's built for New York. And that was the move they made last year. They fell flat on their faces when they did that. I don't know. I may be a little bit too pessimistic right now, but how could you not be?
Listen, tough to be painting an optimistic picture with the Yankees. You're not wrong on that. Until you see otherwise, it's very tough to do.
All right, JJ. Really appreciate you joining me here.
Good therapy. You know, it's good to work it out every now and again, Bryce.
I needed this. All right, you can catch JJ on his podcast, The Ringer's New York, exclusively on Spotify and on select nights on SNY. JJ, really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for joining me.
Anytime, Bryce. Talk to you, buddy. Later.
All right. See ya.